Happy New Year, folks. I've got a Firehawk update. So, over the last probably about a year now, I've been transitioning from the old deployment style into using a new way that we're going to deploy things. So, we used to store all our secrets in an encrypted file, and we generate a deployment from those encrypted secrets within that file. And I just found that it wouldn't really be the best way moving forward, especially when we're introducing new users to secure management of secrets. So I wanted to level up that ability by moving to a product called Hashicorp Vault, which is open source, and changing the way that the deployments work so that we would maintain a main account as well as we would have other spoke accounts that would come off that. So we would have a dev or a green or blue environment where we would spin up different deployments from. So still with the main account, I want to be able to shut everything down and make sure that idle costs, don't are as low as possible. But the idea with the main account is that we are really only putting in things that need to persist across deployments, and we're very careful about what we choose to put in that account. So initially, what that looks like is HashiCorp Vault runs a cluster in there, and it also runs some DNS, a DNS cluster with console in there. And that allows us to have a central store of information that we can go to that's secure that we use to run all our other deployments from. Now, that main account might also house other things in the future, like maybe you want to run your own version control in there, or you might choose to deploy Deadline in there. I'm definitely going to explore that, but I think for the moment, I probably want to keep the Deadline database deployments in the other accounts because it's probably going to change quite a lot. And so this is why you have to be careful about what you put into a main account versus any of the other spoke accounts for, say, a green or blue production deployment, because whatever you put into the main account is going to become a bit encumbered when it comes to having to update something in the main account. So it's not wise to put things in the main account if you expect them to be changing frequently with each deployment cycle. So that's why I probably wouldn't want to put Deadline database in the main account for now, because it's likely that it will be changing quite rapidly because I automate the configuration of the Deadline database. So it's likely I would have different Deadline database for either a green or blue deployment. Now in the future, maybe that becomes stable enough that we decide to not do that anymore. But for now, that's probably how things are going to roll. So right now, I do have Hashicorp Vault up and running, which is pretty cool. It gives the users a user interface to look at and manage their secrets. You can do all sorts of crazy things with Hashicorp Vault, like automatic rotation of secrets, so that leaked passwords. Essentially, if you're doing things right, they don't matter as much anymore because you're changing them frequently enough for that to not be an issue. You've got obviously, integrating all of these things into your workflow. You need to just start off with Vault, using it in a small capacity before you decide to tack on all those extra abilities. So, for example, with Deadline and the certificates, what I'd like to do with Vault is have it manage the certificates that Deadline and all of the other clients use to connect. So using Vault, we're able to do things like manage the revocation of a certificate if we think that something not cool is going on with a particular certificate. And in the future, it'll give us the ability to issue certificates to new users. So, if we're running a deployment as a group of artists and we want to add a new artist into the group, and that artist, maybe they want to bring with them some of their own render power, So we need to be able to issue out certificates for them to be able to contribute those new machines into the rendering cluster, I guess. So using HashiCorp Vault definitely is going to help us, move forward into a world where Firehawk isn't just giving a solution for a single user, but we actually have things in place that will allow us to move into an environment where we're managing multiple users and we're able to have multiple users contributing to a project. And so the next phase right now, I've actually spent probably the last month trying to get Deadline running in the cloud, and it's been a lot more difficult than setting up the deployment locally, but we are getting there. So I needed to remove Ubuntu 16 from the deployment because it's end of life and it was kind of standing out in the way that everything else was running. I only had this one need for Ubuntu 16, which was because it's very easy to install Deadline on Ubuntu 16. But transitioning to Ubuntu 18, you have to install the database that Deadline uses manually. So I'm just working through what has to happen there for that to work properly, and I'm I'm having to learn a lot about how SSL or TLS certificates work and how those essentially are going to be managed to install the Mongo database for Deadline, how we provision the initial users for those connections. So all of that's been like pretty steep learning curve. I'd say that, you know, in the 3-year history of the project that we must be at now, probably the two most difficult things I've done are probably figuring out how to get HashiCorp Vault working, which we've done, and how to also get Deadline working with our own certificate management, and how to handle the Mongo database on the side if you're not getting that installed automatically with Deadline. So I think that it's going to take me still a little while longer to make sure that that's all working. But the whole point of like this phase of the project is that the main account is going to be managing the various images that get built that we then deploy out to, say, either a green or blue deployment, production deployment. And so we're going to be going into a different way of doing things where we're essentially trying to build our images using Packer. And once the images are built, we will deploy them into the green or blue accounts. Now, previously, when we were using Terraform, we were actually doing quite a lot of the provisioning on the fly. It wasn't built into the images, and that was also partly because I didn't know earlier on how to handle secrets and how to provision things like SSH keys and things like that, and how to handle that um, in quite the right way. So there was a lot of configuration happening after the images were built, and probably a bit too much. And so now we're moving into a realm where we're going to really integrate as much of that configuration as possible into the image builds. And we can use Vault to dynamically handle secrets on the fly. So for example, if I spin up my Deadline image, my Deadline database image, we want that to phone into the Vault to initialize, say, passwords and keys, and make sure that that's all driven by Vault. So we can use Vault in a way to dynamically handle all of those secrets that would happen when an image spins up. So all of this is like, it's a whole new way of doing things. It's a massive step up for the project to be doing this. I am like constantly questioning whether or not I am in fact insane, because the level of learning that I've had to acquire to do this is like nothing else I've ever had to do in my life. And it's been an amazing experience, but sometimes it is really difficult because I I sometimes just don't really know what I'm doing. So I have to like do quite a lot of research sometimes to figure out like the right ways of doing things. And there's a lot of trial and error, and then the implementation of the right way of doing things. So I'm really looking forward to this next phase of the project. It's sort of taking what I learned over the last few years and then applying that in a better way to making things closer to well, more correctly. You're never really doing things the right way, but I think that now I'm applying that what I've learned in a way that is going to allow this project to give us a really good foundation for groups of people to operate together in the cloud and do visual effects work together in the cloud. And it's also going to give users, I guess, less headaches because they won't have to spend as much time in a shell configuring secrets, and we're not going to have to rely on users understanding as much about how to manage secrets um, to get going, because Vault definitely will make it much easier for users to operate with their secrets in a more secure way. Whereas before, it would have been possible for a user to make a mistake and leave something in an unencrypted state. I made it very difficult to do that, but there was still a window there. So moving to Vault, where everything is essentially stored in an encrypted state, um, and it's on highly robust, highly available architecture, and it also allows us to move to a model where we can be like fully in cloud as well as hybrid. So that's also a good step, because before it would be pretty difficult to use Firehawk if you were just using a laptop. You would have had quite a few virtual machines. You'd have a few virtual machines that you're probably running, and unless you had like an 8-core laptop or something like that, you probably wouldn't be able to do visual effects work on your laptop as well. So, this phase also allows us to move to a fully or a majority or fully cloud-based deployment, um, while the laptop may just be there for you to do some work, or it may just be used as um, it may just be used for you to connect to a remote desktop as well. Um, I guess another update, since I've done so much and I haven't produced any videos recently, but something else that I'm excited about exploring is using a new product that is a part of AWS for their virtual workstations, and that is Nice DCV. And so I'm exploring using that because it allows us to save more cost running virtual workstations, and it doesn't, because you get it on AWS for free. So if you're using AWS infrastructure, then why not? So although I've still got images that I built using Teradici as an option, I'm definitely interested in exploring Nice TCV, because when it comes to my monthly costs, the things that stand out to me when I'm wanting to do like you use pay license costs on the fly is that the old Teradici license costs were quite a bit for me. So I'm quite interested in trying to lower those costs. I found that paying per hour for Teradici is pretty expensive, and it definitely makes sense to get a license. Like the Teradici license per year is actually, it's really affordable. Um, but I still felt uneasy about requiring a user to do that. If I don't want a user who wants to use a virtual workstation to have to fork out, say, two or $300 a year to use a virtual workstation. So Nice DCV means that the user doesn't have to fork out anything if they want to use a virtual workstation for a month or a couple of hours. So it definitely opens up some possibilities there. So I think that's pretty much it where we're at. I mean, the project's changed drastically, and we're definitely in like an intermediary phase from like an older style of doing things to where I've essentially I'm not touching the Firehawk repository on GitHub. I've now created a Firehawk main repository, which is dedicated towards running a main account. And once I'm happy with where that's at, I will revisit how the Firehawk repository will operate as a spoke from the main account. So yeah, thanks for checking in, and I'll catch you next time.